which is the space of the unknown, we discover a world which may be a new world, but which also may be a world that we just ignored, that we already knew. It was already part of our environment and consciousness.
And for us, for example, when we began to explore the world of what people call slums or favelas and what we essentially sort of understand as homegrown settlements, and we have an argument and a way of looking at these places, we discovered that these are not necessarily the edges or the frontiers of urban spaces or cities, but they actually have their own urban logic. They have their own their own defining reality, which we need to understand.
At the end of the day, the edge is a perspective, right? It's another perspective that we can have on things. If we say that Chile is at the end of the world, it's only because we think of the world being centered around Europe or maybe the US. So it's just about rethinking our point of view.
In fact, a lot of adventurers and voyagers, when they have been traveling and they supposedly discovered new places, they also, in a sense, discovered themselves in many ways. They understood themselves better. They also understood the fact that there are all kinds of histories which existed in places which they didn't know of. Similarly for us, in many ways, when we understand neighborhoods which people don't normally go to or they see as being marginal, we actually find that they are extremely interesting, fun places. They are places which have a lot of richness which we feel need to be understood and tapped.
Yeah, ultimately when we think about the edge, when we think about the end of something, it's also because we're formatted into thinking about it in a certain way. So sometimes it's just enough to get out of the format, to break the mold in order to see what could be the edge. So for example, if we turn this camera upon the place where we are now, here we see another reality, another world, which is the one we're trying to describe in much more clear ways. So this is sometimes just breaking the format is enough for cutting and finding the edge.
Por un lugar como en el que hoy se encuentra Santiago de Chile, como un nuevo continente descubierto, me trae a la cabeza este concepto en realidad muy curioso de que el hecho de que pensemos que la humanidad alguna vez imaginó que la Tierra fuese plana después de la civilización griega es un mito. Realmente después de todos los estudios geométricos y astronómicos de los griegos, incluso mucho antes de los egipcios, ya se conocía la forma esférica de la Tierra, y el hecho de que muchos de nosotros hayamos crecido pensando que durante la Edad Media la gente creía que la Tierra era plana es en realidad un mito. Se me hace muy curioso esta idea de que lo que pensamos que antes imaginaba de una manera errada, en realidad es un error que nosotros estamos cometiendo. Todo empieza con una campaña en el siglo XVII a cargo de los protestantes para cuestionar las enseñanzas católicas, y esta noción de que durante la Edad Media sí se creyó que la Tierra es plana se populariza en el siglo XIX con la publicación de varios libros que corroboran esta afirmación. Y bueno, esto solo me lleva a pensar en que tenemos que dudar todo, no tenemos que dar nada por hecho, y que como arquitectos tenemos ese compromiso de realmente poner todo en tela de juicio. Y me lleva también un poco a la última de las preguntas que se me planteaba, que es la de cómo es imaginar algo desde lejos, y si realmente podemos distanciarnos de las cosas para verlas desde lejos. Y se me hacía muy bonita la idea de que como arquitectos consigamos construir en algún momento, si ya muchas veces se han construido observatorios astronómicos para observar las estrellas y para mirar el universo, la idea de que consigamos construir edificios tan esbeltos en los que sin salir de la Tierra podamos mirar la Tierra desde lejos.
La economía global, la arquitectura y la educación en general están en crisis. El punto de pensar desde el borde o desde el margen es primero preguntarse cuántos muertos eran necesarias para llegar a este margen. En segundo lugar, repensar o probar a reconsiderar el centro de la trayectoria, es decir, Europa, su expansionismo, su historia dominante y muchas veces mentirosa. Me explico. ¿No es muy interesante mirar hacia adelante con la idea falsa que la arquitectura va a emancipar la humanidad, pero mirando hacia atrás y empezar un proceso crítico, analítico y fundamental de este sistema mundo? Este cuestionamiento es necesario para probar si es posible profanar los cánones culturales dominantes, legítimo en la historia clásica o moderna o eurocéntrica. Como arquitectos o urbanistas, nuestra tarea es encontrar qué organización tecnológica y social podría llevar a cabo esta revolución por la puerta de atrás.
I was driving from my home in Maine to Toronto, Canada. In my car, I had a GPS device I was using to plot my route. I reached the border, but instead of Canada, I saw a glitchy white field on the screen. The unit had only shipped with the data for the US. Canada and other countries did not exist. Even though I could clearly see Canada before me, because it wasn't represented on my digital display, it almost felt illusory, like a mirage. Today, we think we have the world at our fingertips, all mapped out before us. But we struggle when our stored representations of the world don't match the real terrain. If the last century was marked by a rabid search for new frontiers by the agents of colonialism and empire, this century is marked by a rabid quantification by agents of digital sensing, data collection, and storage. In this age of what I sometimes call silicolonialism, like silicon, the frontier, the object of manifest destiny, no longer has a place out there. It is a moving target, anywhere and everywhere that has no data. To reach this place, one no longer has to travel in space or time. These blind spots are often hiding in plain sight. If the digital archive is a site of power, the blind spot is its antipode. Those who inhabit the blind spot are stripped of their power in the dominant system, even as they possess their own kind of power as an interruption in the grid, a tear in the net. There is an island in Maine called Malaga, which exists on a map but became a historical blind spot of its own. From the US Civil War until the 1900s, it was home to a small mixed-race community, which was violently evicted by the mainstream culture that considered it a degenerate colony by virtue of its ethnicities, poverty, and difference. As our dominant systems struggle to reconfigure themselves and persist, these blind spots hold the promise of other worlds, new ways of knowing. They are no longer out there, but everywhere in space and time and everyday life, in plain sight. Leveraging the value of these places depends on those who are able to see them. This includes their often marginalized inhabitants, as well as travelers, researchers, and others who pass through or learn how to see and infiltrate them. As many actors converge around these sites to try and create new value from them, we must remain critically aware of both who is allowed to create and who benefits from the creation. A famous Proust quote about the artist's gaze says, "The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes." To me, this is a directive not only for us as practitioners to learn to examine the world through multiple lenses and uncover blind spots, but it is also a directive to let the blind spots assert themselves, to let those who inhabit blind spots not only exist, but develop their own practices, rather than being colonized by crisis-prone dominant systems. It's increasingly important for us to make room for new eyes, for new practitioners, not only in a moral sense, but in terms of survival, as we find ourselves in the midst of global environmental and economic crises that cannot be solved under the same terms that created them.
Standing on the LandsEnd is a privilege. Experimenting and embodying the end is to be forcefully asked to appreciate the tension that are manifested in such territory. Sitting in a complex realm of border, of in-betweens, of weak territories, we're asked to navigate in not overly defined thresholds between modern, postmodern, politics and aesthetics, truth, lies, here and there, north and south, theory and practice. Thinking from an edge is the development of a broader conversation that is both interrogate and confirm the potential significance of architectural practice. Acknowledging the complexity and the contradiction of each site of intervention, we have to constantly negotiate meanings, position, that including where we, the expert, are located. In refusing a conventional, safer, expert-based, object-oriented, aesthetically pure design, architecturally and urban practice, culture, we affirm the power of a latent, a potential and an explicit of design to make substantial contribution to the messy vitality of everyday life in service of the promise of life that is well lived, of just cities and good place and equality. Thinking from the margin is a privilege and it forces us to think architecture as notion in struggles, as it would operate in a series of tensions and reconfiguration in a critical manner. Jacques Rancière argued that politics can only, thus rarely, occur when the logic of domination intrinsic to any polis order, urban is very disciplinary in that, is confronted with the logic of equality. Giorgio Agamben, on the contrary, argued that politics is messianic and so is fulfilling the law, not overcoming or destroying it. It does not seek a revolution or a profound change, but a small one, a small shift that would render the state of exception inoperative. Border, ends and margin are imagined geographies for new possible architectural practice. Embodied the margin require us to take care as much as the process, as much as in which place and shapes are produced, as they do about the product that emerge as a result of collaboration. The engagement in collaborative process requires that everyone makes their relevant belief and knowledge vulnerable. Distance is the scarto, is the promise, is a potential difference that is visible and practicable only from the margin. Architecture does require both distance and difference, and our role is enacting and living of such treasure.
The LandsEnd is a physics landscape. On July 3rd, 2014, the discovery of the Higgs boson was announced at CERN. The Higgs boson essentially explains why elementary particles have a specific mass. Without mass, the atom, and so our universe, would not exist at all. Billions of collisions were needed to find a rare Higgs boson inside the 27-kilometer collider. In many ways, human history is characterized by the naive and irrepressible desire to understand unknown aspects of the environmental process which brings humanity to investigate microscopical secrets of the matter in order to draw, day by day, a clearer picture of the universe. The more the picture discloses itself, the more instinctively we adapt the category through which we observe and transform our environment. Our environment, Lucius Burckhardt once said, is in our heads, formed through culture and education, which allows us to perceive the environment as a landscape and to give it significance. Yet, what we architects frequently forget is that we must observe not only social, economical, and spatial processes, but also the changes in logical thoughts that scientific achievements generate. Physics landscape is a transdisciplinary research focusing on landscape and physics. Analyzing the impact on the landscape of the Higgs boson discovery, the research will talk about the forthcoming architecture. It will use physics to rethink the 21st century landscape.
La Tierra como objeto esférico no tiene fin en cuanto a su superficie, es solo cuestión de perspectiva. Desde el borde podemos ver ambos lados, o todos los lados tanto de la disciplina como el territorio. El margen precede al borde, y allí se crea para lo que no está incluido o integrado. Siempre se imagina desde lejos, desde un mundo platónico de las ideas. ¿Es posible tomar distancia? Se puede, pero no se debe. Hay siempre que acercarse.
Que é se é possível de estar fora, de tirar. Eu acho que, na verdade, o interessante é que a gente sempre vai estar dentro, mas mas você pode estar dentro e fora ao mesmo tempo. E esse é o interessante da margem como borda, como espaço de relação e como espaço como um limite que pode ser tensionado e esgarçado e para criar novas relações e ter novos pontos de vista. Eu acho também que é interessante a ideia de margem como utopia, como borda e como algo que te move e que te faz, que ela está sempre mais longe, a linha do horizonte, ela está sempre mais longe, mas ela te faz caminhar também. E além disso, eu acho que a ideia de margem como um território de disputa, que ele pode ser manipulado. Então, entender o nosso papel na manipulação e no infinito restabelecimento dessa margem. O interessante também é que você não precisa estar fechado numa única perspectiva e que você pode estar em dois lugares ao mesmo tempo. E a questão de criar na margem é interessante porque você tira de um ponto de vista que normalmente é mainstream, é um ponto de vista que é estabelecido e você inverte a balança. Então, acho que pode ser interessante no sentido de tensionar relações e propor novos olhares e novas narrativas. Mas acho que a questão mais interessante de todas é entender a margem não como limite, mas como um território de relações, de disputa, e que pode ser manipulado, e o papel de cada um.